Well, obviously, the Middle East was a place where there's lots of oil, so it was always going to be focused upon because the cult, as I call it, and I'll explain more about that as we go along, which expresses itself through all countries, but expresses itself massively through what we call the West. They wanted control of that oil, but you really can't talk about the Middle East, and I have to say, you cannot talk about 9/11 without talking about Israel, and not Israel necessarily just as a country, and not Jewish people as a community, but talk about the cult that created Israel and controls Israel to this day, and has since created a vast global network of organizations operating out of Israel, including in America. You're not going to eat that, are you?
Little spoonful. Stop my stomach from rumbling.
What is it?
It's almond butter. Cashew butter.
Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You don't have an allergy, do you?
No.
Okay.
No. I have an allergy to looking at it. Anyway, I'm sure it's very good for you. Things that look horrible usually are. But you can't really look at the Middle East without looking at Israel and that which controls Israel. And as we'll come to, 9/11. And, there's a story which will take us through the Middle East and will take us into 9/11. And, I've been exposing for all these decades the web, what I call the web, global web of secret societies and semi-secret organizations, which comes out and plays out through government agencies and the banking system and all that stuff. We talked about that in the last video. But there is an element of the web that is very, very significant to modern events, and certainly significant to the Middle East and to 9/11. And it really started in the 17th century with a guy called Sabbatai Zevi, who claimed to be the Jewish Messiah. And he created a following that at one point, according to Jewish sources, what I'm going to say now is all from Jewish sources, because not all Jewish people think the same. That's another myth. And he had a following of something like 1 million people, which in the 1600s was absolutely fantastic. Anyway, he was operating in the old Ottoman Empire, which of course included what is now Israel. And it got to the point where the Sultan running the Ottoman Empire, the Islamic Ottoman Empire, wasn't having it anymore. And he said to Zevi, you convert or there's trouble, basically. So Zevi converted. And a lot of other people converted with him, and they became known as Donma or Donme, which is a word meaning to turn. And what they did was operate within the Islamic faith, outwardly as Islamic followers, but really followers. And I'm not even going to say followers of Judaism, because it wasn't even that. And this will become very relevant. All this is in the book in great detail. Because what this cult did, and it was an esoteric, what we would call satanic cult, basically, is it inverted Judaism completely. Just like Satanism inverts Christianity and inverts everything. It's the same thing, just different names. And so if there was a fast day in Judaism, in the calendar, to Sabbateanism, as it became known, it would be a feast day, So if Judaism said this was wrong, then it would be encouraged in Sabbateanism. It became an absolute inversion of Judaism. Zevi declared himself the Jewish Messiah, and then died. And then in the next century, along came a guy called Jacob Frank. Jacob Frank has been described by Jewish sources as one of the most terrifying people in Jewish history. But again, he wasn't Jewish, he was a Sabbatean, because he claimed to be the reincarnation of Zabbatai Zevi and the reincarnation of the biblical patriarch Jacob. And he took Sabbateanism into new depths of depravity and inversion, and the movement became known as Sabbatean Frankism. These Donma, operating in the Islamic religion while being Sabbateans, not even Jews, Sabbateans or Sabbatean Frankists, you follow that one strand of them through, and eventually they become the Saudi royal family. Another Sabbatean called Wahhabi, who married into that Wahhabi family married into the Saudi royal family, thanks to the British Empire, who brought them together. Wahhabi, a Sabbatean Frankist, was the creator of Wahhabism, the head chopping, arm chopping, ISIS extremist form of Islam, which is funded and protected by the Saudi royal family. They're not Islamic, they are Sabbatean Frankists. They are part of this death cult, this inversion. And so you have Saudi Arabia running the country on death cult lines, where people have their head chopped off, where people have their arms chopped off, where the big time Sabbatean Frankist crown prince Mohammed bin Salman, who was responsible for the horrific cutting up death cult ritual of Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi dissident journalist, you start to understand also from this why the Saudi royal family, for a long time in the background, now more and more since the crown prince came to the fore in public, are so close to Israel. You'd think there would be absolute opposites, wouldn't you? Because Sabbatean Frankists hiding within Judaism, because this is what happened, particularly after Jacob Frank, is they started to take the infiltration of Islam and expand it into the infiltration into the Vatican and the Roman Church and Christianity. It's where Christian Zionism comes from. And to expand it into, which was not too difficult given their background, into taking over the Jewish community. And one of the most prominent inner core, that is, Sabbatean Frankist families, is called Rothschild. And this is why the Rothschilds were so central to the creation of Israel, because Israel was created as a Sabbatean Frankist fiefdom. What they did with the Jewish community is, and this is why I've said in that book, no one needs to read that book more than the Jewish community to see how they've been stitched up. What they did was start to construct a fake history to sell to the Jewish community, and a fake historic right to Palestine. Of course, they wanted that land. And they used the First World War particularly to get rid of the Ottoman Empire, which controlled what we now call Israel, then Palestine, as it's known to Arabs.